Well, everyone, welcome back to Season 1, Episode 30 of Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, where today we have yet another special guest with us. We have Kevin from KevinTheCritic.com helping us talk about Ready Player One. So we're looking at life in the OASIS, sometimes and how it was different in literature than it was on screen, and how we kind of like some characters more than our hero.
But before we do hop back into the Oasis, if you got here because 80% of your screen was covered in ads, or because you're grinding to afford a haptic suit that leaves very little to the imagination, we're Chelsea, Joe, and Mark, three friends who occasionally can't always record together, but bring some great guests to help us along the way. If you need to find us, though, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Try typing in Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, or our handle at Digital Dissect 1. Hopefully, that'll get you to us in a timely fashion. So, without further ado, let's hop back into that Oasis and see what Kevin the Critic is thinking about Gunters, Sixers, and corn syrup draughts. Well, folks, occasionally we do contests on Twitter, and we always remember them, but it might seem like we don't. Which brings us to the topic of Ready Player One. So we actually ran a Twitter poll, I want to say just about a month ago, and Ready Player One was one of the topics that was in there. We've covered almost everything else that was included so far, which was Trey Parker and Matt Stone week, which y'all have absolutely loved. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't forget about this film because we were very big fans of it. And along the way, one of our friends here on Twitter actually decided to join in with us. So this week, helping us break down the film is Kevin the Critic. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
Pretty good. I've been looking forward to this ever since you said you had me come on. I've been watching the film again. Probably be watching the film again all the way through for the first time since I saw and reviewed it 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was an unexpectedly interesting experience watching that movie now. There's a lot going on in there that is whether intentional or not. I think some parts of it might speak louder now than they did when it came out in 2018.
Oh yeah, and part of the reason we wanted to bring you in on this too was because you've actually been reviewing movies for quite a long time. I mean, as far back as 2005, right?
I've been reviewing movies since I was 10. I started doing it for a local newspaper, and I did that up through college, and then I had to find a paying job, and so I couldn't do it as much. So
yeah, money just ruins all the fun,
money. It's a adulting thing. You see your parent, you're a kid, and you see your parents buying the food and going out to Bunko on Fridays, and you're like, this looks easy. And then you get to it yourself, you're like, oh
no, this is a horrible idea.
Oh no.
Suddenly my fruit snack limitation and bedtime don't seem like it's that restrictive.
Yeah, and I can't. And wait, what? You mean I can't have McDonald's anymore without physical consequences?
Dude,
oh no!
Oh my gosh! So you started reviewing for a local paper when you were 10 years old?
Yeah, the paper was running a contest where they wanted a kid to send in a review of a movie. I had just seen the first Madagascar movie.
Okay.
And my parents suggested that hey, why don't you write a review of this and send it in for this thing? I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I sent it in, and they liked it so much that they asked me to come in and talk to them. And after meeting the editor and his wife and all the and all the people who worked there, they asked me if I wanted to be, the official kid movie reviewer for them. And then,
cool.
I was like, yeah. So you go back and read. It's like if you go back, like to like the farther pages of my site, you'll notice like almost every one of them is like a Disney movie or some kid movie. It's like, yeah, that's because that's what I could see at the time. So like you're not going to find any like, upon release reviews of The Departed on there. 11-year-old me was not watching The Departed, but yeah, it's been great to, and then in 2015 I started, with the help of the newspaper editor's wife, I set up my blog site, kevinthecritic.com, and established Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages that I monitor frequently and try to interact with people on. And Twitter is as mixed of a blessing as it can be, is a good space to talk to just geek out any time of day. So I try to use it for that.
Well, and you've got I mean, I really do appreciate your website because, you still do review animated films on there, of course, but then you've got stuff from like independent creators, you've got like the new Marvel stuff on there too. So, I mean, you're definitely covering a pretty, broad area within cinema.
Well, yeah. And the thing about the independent stuff is like people, I don't find that like people will sometimes email me and ask if they want me to review their stuff, and then I'll look at it and I'll normally I'll normally do it. So that's where a lot of the indie stuff comes from. The theaters in my hometown and up here where I am now, they mostly show just like big blockbusters and stuff. So the way that I find out about the indie films is when people send them to me like that. So it's been an interesting experience seeing some of these indie films and seeing like what the creators are doing with smaller budgets and unknown casts and all of that stuff, and comparing it to like, oh wow, like they can, like people are always saying like, oh, how blockbusters are always these huge expensive things, like where the human stories at. And I'm like, well, the human stories are in independent films from companies you've never heard of, but you have to. That's the thing, like, and like just seeing what these upcoming and seeing what these directors and writers and crews are able to do with significantly less money than a lot of the big studio guys. It's really interesting, like how much more emphasis they seem to place on, like character and making sure that the dialogue sounds good, and make it just like little things that things like get us invested in a story or the people in it, because they don't have $200 million to spend on a big explosion or
or a much finer craft service that you would get on a big budget movie set, which we recently learned is the biggest way you can tell the difference if you're on set for a blockbuster versus an independent movie is the quality of food.
We talked to actor Dean Bahar, who starred in Basketball and Orgasmo and a couple other movies here, and he mentioned that specifically, that the craft services is one of the biggest distinguishing factors between the sets you're on.
All I can say is I know that Space Jam: A New Legacy had some production problems that have come out recently. I hope that at least the craft services were satisfactory. Like that's the story that I'm waiting for. It's like, okay, so that's the story I'm waiting for. It's like, I'm not going to get into what happened with it. Like, there's some controversy around, but like, I'm just waiting for the story now. It's like, and they didn't pay the craft services.
Yeah, didn't tip their waiters or anything. Well, like speaking of like Space Jam, one thing that they did in this movie was something they did a lot.
Yeah,
Ready Player One was the amount of cameos and the extra universe.
Okay, so you know what so watching when I saw the trailer for Space Jam 2, the very first thing I thought was like, oh, so you're making Ready Player One for kids and 50-year-old and people who are 40 now who grew up with Space Jam, or like people who are like my age now, like 20 something. Like Space Jam 2 to me is like Ready Player One for kids and 25-year-olds. And Ready Player One is itself for like people who love pop culture and playing the like on the surface level, it's like people who love pop culture, love playing the like spot the IP game,
Yeah.
you know, and people who are really into video games and just you know the worlds of them. That's something that's I guess like to get the subject on track. That's one of the things that I liked about it, and that I liked about like when I saw it then, and especially when I saw it now, was like the animation style that they use when they're in the OASIS.
Yeah,
is really like it. I mean, this could be a positive or negative depending on who you are. It's a positive for me. When they're in the OASIS, it looks like, you know, at that point, like it would be like a PS3 game or something, like a high quality graphics video game world and the way that they move and everything like that. So on that level of it, I think the visuals of this thing are still impressive now, like 3 years on.
Absolutely.
Well, and then take into consideration too, I mean, obviously Steven Spielberg directed this film, but he's also reunited with cinematographer Janusz Kaminski, who he worked with on Saving Private Ryan. And so there's at least there's some collaborative stuff there.
As a heads up, with Janusz Kaminski, if you happen to live in the Upper West Side and your power goes out, Janusz will come to make sure you and your family are okay.
I didn't know that he worked on this, but that's another thing that I thought for the most part was really good, was like the way that most of this is shot. It's like this thing is in the trailer, with like the way that the shot where it transitions from Wade putting on his goggles and then going into the OASIS, as we're like doing this widespread shot about like all the different worlds and stuff. It's like it immerses you immediately into it. And you know, and in the moment it's like there's a sense of wonder to it, in that, you know, when it transitions there, that I think they really needed to nail, or else I would have been like,
like having something that graphically or like visually look horrible at that point would just check you out, because you know you're spending a good chunk of the movie there.
Well, and that's another thing about it that on first viewing surprised me, was like, so I saw the movie in 2018 with my sister, who's not nearly as familiar with like pop culture and IPs and stuff as I am, or video games. Like, she doesn't do video games, and she wasn't a huge fan of this because of all of the like referencing and stuff like that. She didn't recognize a ton of it or get the terms that they were using. And to her, the trailer did not give the impression that as large a portion of it that's animated would be animated. That's something that, and for me, once I realized probably about like 45 minutes in that it was going to be mostly an animated film with like occasional cutbacks to him sitting in his chair, like Nolan Sorrento in his office, things like that. Like once I realized it was going to be primarily animated, I was like, okay, great, I'm in the right headspace now. Like, so yeah, I like it. So yeah, I think the animation style that they use is like perfectly representative of what most high-end video games look like at that time, which they needed to nail. I think that was probably the single most important thing they needed to get right in order for this to work even a little bit, and they did.
And I think it's probably important to paint a little bit of a picture for the folks that may not.
I was just thinking, not familiar here.
And I can I can do that, and I can do that. So this is one of the elements of the movie that 2018. Okay, you go with it. Now you're like, oh God. In a world where people have in a world where things have gotten so difficult that people basically have like given up trying to solve anything and just want to like be inside all the time. You know, there is this ultra powerful piece of video gaming technology that allows people to go inside of this huge MMORPG video game thing called the OASIS. The creator of the thing passed on a while ago and set up this contest where the winner of it would basically get they get like $1 trillion in stock options or something.
Oh yeah,
and control of it. No, and that's the thing. Like I wrote in my review back in the day. It's like what if a 3-year-old wins it? What are you gonna do? Like spend the $1 trillion on lollipops or something? Like what are the limits of this thing? Like if I'm just imagining like a little 5-year-old kid winning this and be like, I'm on every Power Ranger and Sonic toy ever. It's like, well, got the money. But anyway, our main
5-year-old in a haptic suit would be a sight to behold.
No, I think we actually do see that in the opening bit of it, like where we're seeing all these people in their haptic suits, or we see some. Yeah. But anyway, our main guy is Wade Watts. He's a pop culture guru. He knows everything about the game creator. He's been trying to figure out, you know, how to solve the mystery that he left behind. And over the course of trying to do that, he discovers that totally not Google has nefarious plans for, you know, the OASIS. And basically. Yeah, this evil company run by an evil dude, Nolan Sorrento, wants to basically monetize the OASIS and put ads up. Which I was like, wait.
He wants it somewhere between early internet pop-ups and how cable industries run their television packages.
Yeah, and like when I was watching it this time, I was like, wait. So is ad blocker no longer a thing? Because
it won't be when that man has control. Or it will, but you've got to pay for that.
No, yeah, and that's I love his introduction scene where he's like trying to sell this idea to his people. He's like, our studies have shown that we can cover the screen, like 80% of the screen, without causing seizures.
Yeah, that's a great line.
I love that's my favorite line of his in the entire movie, because it's like, as cynical as this is, I can almost imagine some business person maybe thinking that. Like they wouldn't say it out loud, but like maybe no. But yeah, that's basically the deal. Like Wade teams up with other gamers to try and like stop the company from taking over and solve the mystery of the creator. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being vague. I'm just trying not to.
No, totally okay. No, I think what you did was great, because you're laying out exactly the heart of, and you laid out the plot for the movie, but we haven't given away all the finer details. This is what's going on in the movie. You've got big corporate jackwagon, and then you've got our nice independent heroes of the film trying to keep it so that the OASIS is not going to be some cluttered corporate mess, and they want to make it so it is what it currently is, or at least like that's also we start out with the movie is they want to keep it free, and that's their only goal. As our characters push through and evolve, their wants for the OASIS also change.
And in the spirit of the OASIS's creator, James Halliday, you know, his whole focus behind this was not to sell it out and not to make it into this, you know, basically like a corporate hellspace, like a lot of things tend to be after a while.
Yeah.
And it's set in the year 2045, and it's set against this kind of strange landscape where we've got, I wouldn't call it post-apocalyptic, but it's definitely dystopian. You know, there's environmental issues on the planet, you know, which is kind of a unfortunately bleak view of the next 25 years.
Well, yeah, and the thing about that, something that I like about the book is that the book is about like 450 pages long or so. And it spends literally the first 100 of those pages getting you caught up on how the world got this way and how it works in a way that the movie doesn't have time to do. But when I read it, I was like, okay, so now because that was one of the problems with the movie, was that like, okay, so I'm not exactly sure how the real world got this way. The book explains that, as well as some finer details of like how the Oasis works and how people do things in it. And I get why they cut some, and it's things that I wish they would have put in the movie just briefly, so that they could be like, okay, this is. It would have done a better job selling me on the movie's version of this world. But yeah, the world outside it's definitely a dystopian place. It's like trailer parks are like stacked on top of each other. That's how bad the situation is.
Sprawling, burgeoning population of a metropolis that is Ohio at this point. Not again. As someone who is a proud resident of a flyover state, I'm not making fun of our friends in Ohio.
You're making fun of the depiction of Ohio, not actually Ohio.
Yes, absolutely. Because in the movie, it just kind of gives us, like I said, that we don't really have an idea of the world outside of Ohio here. And Ohio is just kind of our glimpse that overpopulation is becoming to be an issue. And that's really all we have in the movie.
That's it.
Keep this in mind, though. Ohio in this timeline and in this setting is kind of viewed as an epicenter of the United States, because that's how just how that's where people went after some of these I think they call it the corn syrup shortages or whatever it was.
Corn syrup, like all these shortages and all these
corn syrup wars.
All these wars and things. And I'm like, the next 25 years are gonna suck. It's very it does a decent enough job of like saying like, okay, so the world is going to hell, and so at least on that level I'm like, okay, I understand why people would want to escape into the Oasis, because if the world was as bad as it's portrayed in the film, it's like, you're like an 18-year-old, like, hell, I'm playing video games all day, I don't know how to solve this. They do a good job with that.
The correlations between this setting and what we run into just in our lives here is that it's kind of an allegory to the sense that people have found different ways to escape reality with technology, whether there are things like wars or famine or poverty that are taking over outside, and so that same escape idea is on full display in this movie.
And I think what the movie again also tries to establish here is that a good thing? Even though people who are in the Oasis and want to have it for what they conceive as to be the right reason, which is a non-corporate, like crazy, like 80% of my screen not seizuring thing, is that still the right way you're supposed to cope with your problems? And the movie does address that.
I think it. I think it addresses. I think the way it addresses it is mixed. I think sometimes the way that it addresses the issue of like escaping reality and all that, like sometimes it works, and then in the moment where they want to hit you hard emotionally at the end of it, I think that I see what they're trying to do, but the way that it's executed for me, I'm like, it doesn't work as well as they want it to, and I'm not sure if it's in the writing or the performance. I don't know what it is. Like it's just the way they. I think it might be like the way it's written in that scene at the end. I'm like, I agree with this, but the way you're saying it doesn't work as well as you think it is, at least for me.
Well, let's look at this for a moment, though, because the people that do tend to have an issue with this movie, they tend to drive home the fact that in lieu of all of these references and all of these things that get thrown at you, we really sacrifice character development quite a bit.
That was one of the things that I had an issue with too. That was the thing I had an issue with, was that like, yes, you have this great world and this animation and the action, but like, I don't get a good sense of who Wade Watts is outside of he loves pop culture. And that's a problem, because like he's your main character of the film, and it's like, okay, Ty Sheridan he's a good enough actor. I'm like, fine, but again, his personality, I'm like, you are literally just that. Like, you're defined by your your love of pop culture. And then you read the book, and then you're like, oh wait, no, I know why they did that.
Well,
I mean, in the movie, we get Wade Watts, who at the start is like, I'm just full on pop nerd, and his character development after that is to straight up start simping.
He begins the movie as a Halliday simp, and he ends it as an Artemis simp. Like, he just goes between different simpings, which in the book, his character is given a lot of traits that are very unlikable. Or it's like, I'm sure in 2011, I can get why, but like reading it in, I think I read it in 2019. Reading it then, I was horrified at like, oh, well, yeah, I see why you did what you did. It was a good decision to make changes to his character that they did, because although he's not as developed, he is more likable on screen.
Okay,
well, he's likable. He's likable on screen, but where I kind of struggle with him as a main character is that in other films where you deal with a character who suffered quite a bit of loss or is an orphan, like in the sense of what he is, or in a lot of cases, folks like Peter Parker.
Every good hero is an orphan. That's how it works.
Every single Marvel superhero.
Well, but those characters though explore their grief in different ways, right? Like they have a sense of longing. There's a sense of needing to be a part of something, and what ends up happening here isn't this like sense of I miss my parents, or my mom's sister. My mom's sister.
Okay, yeah, but Jordan said, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that's a major problem with the movie. Is that he loses someone who should be important to him. And then he just the movie never addresses that again. We don't see him be emotionally impacted by that. Like it doesn't increase the personal stakes for him at all that he experienced that loss. And in fact, I would say that like watching the movie now this time, I was thinking to myself like, why is Artemis not the main character? Because she has no, because again, even in the book and in the movie, I think like in the movie she is. I think she's a more interesting character than he is because she has more loyal motivations. I think that she's a lot more driven than him. She is far more aware of. Yes, the OASIS is great, but it also has these problems that people aren't addressing because they want to stay and be and remain happy in it.
Yeah, she's very much the Hermione Granger of the story. She is really pulling all of it. Like she's the foundation for which Harry Potter actually succeeds.
I would say she's Joan of Arc, man. She's like Joan of Arc. Like she's the image behind which people begin to follow because she represents essentially here what is the opposition to IOI or innovative online industries that is led by Nolan Sorrento.
The man with two last names.
Which makes him a villain because if you have two first names, you're just an idiot. But if you got two last names, you're horrible.
Well, yeah, and then I love when Wade narrates like it's run by some dickweed named Nolan Sorrento. It's like, yep, okay.
Well, and what I think is hilarious about him, he's played by like 2000
Ben Mendelsohn.
Yes, like the perennial bad guy of 2018. Ben Mendelsohn.
Oh my god, there was like I feel like Spies in Disguise was the last movie where he was like the go-to villain, and then it was like, oh, I mean, he's done other stuff, but yeah, like there was like a 3-year period where almost every single major movie you saw, I was like, oh, they got Ben Mendelsohn to play the bad guy in this.
We're redoing the Passion, guys. We're going to redo the Passion. Who do we play as Pontius Pilate? Guys, I got the perfect person for you.
Also, funny story, we need someone to play Judas. Can he do both?
Yeah.
It's going to be like Jack Nicholson, Mars Attacks. It's going to be a dual role.
Yeah, we'll do motion capture for Judas. We'll do him in like in a mocap.
Now, Judas is going to look like a cartoon character.
Before we go too far off this, I don't want to take away from like the Artemis discussion because again, she's a much better character. But I'm interested to hear like more about like what made made Wade Watts, because I didn't read the book,
Okay.
so I'm kind of like, what are some of the, before we go any further, what are some of the character flaws that made him likable? Because sometimes when characters start off with severe flaws and we see that change through a movie or through a book, that's really good. Like I think of like Real Steel with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah,
the Charlie character is a horrible character to start off with. Like he's not a good guy. Even like the other good people in the movie are like, Charlie, you're not a safe bet. You're not good. But we see that change as it goes on. So I feel like when a character has those big flaws, that's an opportunity for growth in a movie.
And before Kevin, before you get into it, I do want to mention this. So I did read a small portion of Ready Player One, Joe. Now, one of the big differences between the book and the movie is that the book spends almost like the first 150 pages just focusing on Wade Watts. And so when I read the preview, I read this very fleshed out, you can understand everything about Wade and what's going through his head. The book itself actually goes much more into his relationship with like the schools that are also in the OASIS, because the education system funnels through the OASIS. So
interesting.
You get much more of this in the book, and it also explains more of why he idolizes Artemis, because he watches her from afar. He's got this adoration for her that you basically get in like 3 minutes in the movie, right?
So you're telling me that had I lived in this time, I would be teaching in the OASIS, and I could just boot my students out of the whole thing.
Probably. I mean, no, probably yes. No, but yeah, that's it. But yeah, he's right. It does spend the first 150 pages literally just describing, like, characterizing Wade Watts, who he is, and how the world functions, which is fine.
Yeah, so in that 100 pages, what makes Wade Watts like an unlikable person?
Okay,
so they change things, so it makes him bad. Yeah.
Okay, so initially when they're setting it up, that isn't so much. The problem isn't as apparent. It's later on when it's when he meets Artemis and starts interacting with her and starts having thoughts in his head about her, and the way that he perceives their relationship. The way that it's written in the book is exceptionally creepy and stalkery and not romantic in the slightest. And he objectifies her mightily in the book, and if the book was if this was a character flaw that the book recognized, and if he learned not to do the other courses, that'd be fine. But the problem with the book is that the book, it wants you to be on Wade's side. It wants you to root for him to get Artemis, when in actuality he is legitimately like stalking her, and she tells him off several times, and he just won't take no for an answer. And so it goes. So in 2011, I can understand like why some publisher wouldn't notice it, but now it's like that does not work at all. So
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And then it does. It's very it was just very creepy to read.
Well, but here's another critical part of this, right? So in the movie, things whittle down to trying to find these 3 keys that the founder of the OASIS, James Halliday, left behind for people to discover in the game. He left some clues as to how to find it. So you find the first key, you get the next clue, right? One of the big key differentiators between the movie and the book is that when the first quote unquote key is found, and I'll simplify this because there's a little bit more going on in the book. One of the things that they actually changed quite a bit in lieu of character development here is that once the first key gets found, the only complication is really finding the next key. In the book, they find the first key, and then Wade gets caught up in the partnerships and the endorsements. And so he's a poor kid growing up who he lost his parents, doesn't really have any role models. Now he's trying to figure out, all right, well, I'm going to take the endorsements because money has been a problem for me since I have been alive. So we don't end up getting that between the in the movie.
So he goes all Coach Bombay and D2 on us.
That section is entirely that aspect of the plot is entirely absent, which is weird, which is which is weird given how much of that section of the story it takes up. Like there's a great deal of detail given to all these sponsorships and all this money, and him being conflicted with himself about like, okay, I need to keep my eye on what the actual prize is. But yeah, like the movie doesn't do any of the movie doesn't acknowledge any of that. I mean, I think the closest that it gets is like there's a scene where Sorrento, he has a like conference with Sorrento, and he tries to like coax him into working for IOI, and that scene is the closest the film ever gets to hinting at like that aspect of the plot in the book of like, oh, he's a famous guy now, so sponsors are going after him.
Well, but it would make sense though. I mean, because I think one of the strongest parallels between that and things like professional gaming, right? Because that's really what we're seeing here are these people that are jumping into this big MMO. They're showing their skills and they're trying to get this big prize. And so to me, I thought that parallel made sense, that there would be sponsorships and corporate minds that would be trying to lasso these people in and make as much money off of them.
It totally makes sense. And again, like I think that one of the strengths that the book has over the movie, though I prefer the movie more as an overall thing, what the book has over it is a sense of world building and kind of mostly like logical follow-up points. Like, okay, so everyone in the world is a professional gamer now, so of course all these corporate sponsorships are going to be watching, okay, who are the best ones and who can we get behind financially and who can we like there's a surprising amount of like well thought out development of the universe that makes you wish that he wouldn't have made Wade such a creep, so that you could get more of that. I guess
I agree with you on this, Kevin, because in the beginning of the film, the majority of the world building for the OASIS itself is condensed into about like a 45-second to 1 minute montage of what's going on.
And that's the thing. Like, the problem is like if you haven't like, and this is one of the sayings. This is one of the first instances where I think the movie is geared very specifically toward people who are gamers and pop culture people, because that opening in the OASIS is like, you can go into Minecraft world and see all these things and climb Mount Everest with Batman. And it's like, okay. And like, if you're a person who loves all that stuff, you're like, that's great. If you're a person that isn't as into geek stuff or doesn't recognize it, you're like, okay.
Yeah, the movie will seem pretty hollow because all those and the vast majority of the references are video game based.
Yeah, and
you do get a few like movie ones, like you get Jurassic Park and King Kong, but a lot of it is video game.
A lot of it's video game based, and like I think one reference they kept from the book. They changed a number of references from the book to update it to now, because it came out in 2011 and that was in 2018. So they updated it so that they would be talking about stuff from 10 years ago or something, or 20 years ago, not 30. Yeah. But there's a moment where his best friend H is like, you gotta get rid of that Son About Mary haircut. I'm like, why are y'all still... Why?
Yeah.
For us, the haircut doesn't even look like the haircut on the character design doesn't even look like that.
For us, that reference is dated by over 20 years. For them, that reference is dated almost 50. So it's how many movies are we quoting that is 50 years old at this point? None of us here.
And that's the thing where that's probably the most standout line of like, you should have changed that to something else, because again, it's 2045. I think in the book it's like a little bit earlier in time. It's not 2045, it's something else. Yeah, like this in the movie it's 2045. So why are you referencing a movie from 1994 before you were born? Like, I didn't know about this. And anyway, that's a really small point. Though.
Yep. And then although my favorite reference made in the movie was not due to aging, it was actually due to copyright issues, because they couldn't get the rights to that character to actually be used in the movie, so they had to change it. But it was for those of you who have read the book and people who did, like there was Ultraman is supposed to pop up in the movie, but they do play an homage to that in the movie when they talk about how Kevin, you did a great job painting a picture of the Oasis, and they're talking about going from world to world. And at the start of the movie, there's this basically this raid or this competition to get to the top of a mountain. So you can get this object that gives you any like giant robot form you want for 3 minutes. And that's an homage to Ultraman, who could only hold his giant form for 3 minutes at a time. So that was their way of keeping that in. But thankfully, for people like myself, we ended up getting the RX-78-2 Gundam at the end of the movie as opposed to Ultraman.
Yeah, that's that Gundam thing at the Gundam fight at the end of it is one of the I like that it's there because it answers a question of a lot of the IPs that they show are like in the background. It's mostly like it's a lot of like American owned English language stuff.
Yep.
And in the book, in the movie, and in the little 40-second thing, but in the books, they're like they tell you people from everywhere all over the world are here. And so I appreciated that they did that Gundam thing because it was like good because that like I wish there was more of that to show that there are people that it's not just people in America that are in here. There's a lot of American characters in there, which is great, but it's like it makes it feel a bit less like global than it could have.
Yeah. And I mean, Gundam was a great point because there are plenty of people who don't know what it is because they said the BBC World News or BBC Sports page just did a tweet with saying that competitive climbing was scary enough without a transformer gazing in on you, and it's a picture of an awesome Gundam statue that Japan has that I've seen in person, and it's I love it, but it's just this Gundam staring at them like that's not a transformer.
No,
but that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna comment on this for a moment because we do get Mechagodzilla, right? Like, so we at least get some of that, but the larger point here is that Steven Spielberg had quite a few things he could put into this movie, but he even pulled it back a little, saying, "I don't want all of my own works to be in this because then it feels like vanity," and so even with him filtering out some of his most popular works, we're still essentially being Western washed with the references that we get, which makes sense to a point. But yeah, you would think with a worldwide MMO, like a global MMO, that you would see other things, and maybe it just came down to licensing. Who knows?
Well, maybe. And again, I think the way that they use most of the characters, like the way they cameo them, it works. Like King Kong shows up, and Iron Giant. Like you see a bunch of really popular stuff, and it's fun and it works. But yeah, I think the best sequence in the movie is like when they find the second key. Like even most people who don't like the movie, like most of them admit, like, yeah, this one little section right here by itself is amazing.
And so, Kevin, what you're pointing out here is for the first key, they kind of changed this from the book, which we won't get into too much because otherwise we'll be talking book all day.
Okay, so throw the book out now.
Now take the Buckaroo Banzai.
No,
but the first key is whittled down, though. The first key is whittled down to basically like it's a race. You have to figure out how to win the race. No big deal. The second key is a fairly convoluted and long reference thing in the book, so they whittled this down even further to have it basically be set within the world of The Shining, and then weave in what's really a fairly compelling love story between James Halliday, the creator of the Oasis, and who would end up being his partner, Ogden Morrow's future wife, and they did a pretty good job with blending like horror and this failed love story, right?
I thought for that particular sequence, yes. I think they do a good job of connecting like how it makes sense based on how Halliday is characterized that he would be scared of doing what he couldn't do. And so putting her there, and that's kind of what the challenge is. I think as far as the love element goes in the movie, that scene utilizes it best. And it's actually scary. Like there's a tension in that sequence that's not as much in the rest of the movie. And like the imagery in it is terrifying. Like I saw it, I was like, good Lord, she did it.
Well, but relationships on their own can be very scary. Like they say, it's the leap not taken, right? The leap not taken in the relationship for James Halliday is something that it really shakes a lot of us, right? Like the idea of putting yourself out there and showing someone, your full heart or your full mind, whatever it might be. I think despite the horror and those undertones in this sequence, it does balance really well because you can kind of feel the inner struggle of Halliday here and what it did to him.
Yeah, you can tell that it's a decision that haunted him, and so it's kind of, and now it haunts this place, which again I think it's a good way to have like the heroes learn a little bit more about him that you can't find in like the Halliday servers or anything like that. Like it's a good emotional beat for the Halliday character. And also I love that they got Simon Pegg to play Ogden Morrow, and I didn't realize I didn't realize it was Simon Pegg at all until the credits went. I was like, oh my God, I didn't recognize him at all. And for like he's got limited screen time relatively, but when he's on, he's really good.
Yeah, no, it's fun to see. Like again, like I always like it when actors are cast and they can display range, as opposed to, hey, Will Ferrell did this, and this is not a bash Will Ferrell thing, but like, hey, Will Ferrell was funny, let's have him do the same thing but in this other movie. So you get Simon Pegg, who's like traditionally been like, goofy fun movie time, and in here we don't see a character like that at all. We've got different depth, we've got emotional weight going on with him, and he does a great job doing it here.
Now, for a moment, I think it's really important to point this out, that part of James Halliday leaving these clues in the game is basically holding this like library of Halliday within the OASIS that you can go view. They mentioned that it's like security footage, nanny cam footage.
Why do you keep a nanny cam?
On top of that, he made that decision. He's like, yeah, I'll put that in here for people to use.
Okay. No telling what they're going to use it for, but it's here.
Yeah, it's great though, because it gives you such quick and like truncated context of the relationship between Halliday and Morrow, which adds to that depth, Joe. It adds to the depth of the relationship between these two characters, and I think it's really a credit to Simon Pegg and Mark Rylance, and I believe, Mark
Rylance is Halliday.
He's been knighted as well. Mark Rylance.
He has.
So,
wow.
Yeah. Good. Sure.
He's I think that Mark Rylance does a really good job of playing him as this super socially awkward, reclusive guy who you can't, like we see guys like this in the world who are like they're socially awkward, but they're geniuses who build all these amazing pieces of technology. I think like the way that they characterized him, it was like that was good. I appreciated that. And there's only one of two more times I reference the book, I promise. But like, I swear, there's like one time and then one more time, and then I promise I won't. But like, I liked it in the book. They point out that it was discovered that Halliday was on the autism spectrum. Which in the movie they don't. And in the first movie, when I saw the movie the first time, I'm on the autism spectrum as well. Like I know other people on the spectrum, but I didn't know that character was supposed to be when I first saw it. And then when I read the book later, I was like, oh, okay, so he must have read this book, and he is playing him as a guy on the spectrum. And I thought is a little stereotypical, but he does a good job with the performance of it. Like he totally sells that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting too, because you can see where his mind travels, right? Like there's a scene where they're talking about the OASIS technology, and his mind is off somewhere else. Like he's just kind of staring into blank space.
Yeah.
And then he cracks a joke 10 seconds later about if you look under your seats, you'll see that nothing is there.
Yeah.
we're gonna pass around the tech now. And it's like,
yeah.
to me it made sense. Like I didn't know the context of him being on the spectrum from the book. I do think it's a bit of a lost opportunity though to further add some depth to him, and really give people something to identify with, because I mean, that's a huge lost opportunity there.
Yeah, and again, like when I read that, because Wade mentions it offhandedly in the book, like, oh, in 25 years later, he found he was autistic, and I was like, why did they not say that? Because if they had put that in there, it would have, it like you said, it would have given people something to identify with, and it would have explained why he's acting the way he does, you know, and not come off like, in case people don't know what the autism spectrum is, I feel like he could come off as just a weird dude who has an odd speech pattern. So yeah, I wish they would have left that detail in there.
Yeah,
this is just to flesh him out a little bit and explain why his performance is pitched at the cadence that it is.
Yeah. And why it's even, and why it's so it's that much more impressive, because I think he does a really, really good job with his portrayal, and I think it would even help to better understand, once again, this fear of taking that jump, and there's so many things in his head he's trying to, you know, I wouldn't say balance out, but like that would just be huge context to have to help.
Yeah, and again, when I read that, I was like, I cannot believe you cut this. That because it helps the character makes so much more sense in every action that he takes. But
although I wonder if one of the reasons why is almost like a Tropic Thunder reason. If you remember Tropic Thunder, Ben Stiller's character who like basically tried doing an artsy movie. Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if it may have been a simple Jack. Like, is this guy trying too hard? He's gone too far, or
I feel like, for me, I feel like I'm fine with Tropic Thunder doing what it does with that to a point.
Oh, well, yeah.
Only because they're very aware that it's not right, and that actors do that kind of thing. Like, I get what the joke is. In Ready Player One, it doesn't come off to me as offensive or like mishandled. It just comes off like you should have had this detail about this character so that you could have given him a little bit more depth.
And it doesn't take away necessarily from him to not have the context, but it does once again kind of transform this character. I mean, the depiction that Rylance kind of goes with is brilliant. I mean, it's immediately something that you can recognize that's totally different from everyone else in the movie itself. So I think that's a credit just to Rylance and his ability to harness all these things. And
absolutely.
And so totally, I'm in love with his performance in this movie. If you can't tell.
His performance is one of the like most standout elements of it, because it is like totally all in there. And it would have been really, really easy for the wrong person to come in and kind of overplay it or make it just uncomfortable to watch or kind of just goofy. And I feel like he kind of finds a decent middle ground between, like, this isn't entirely accurate, but it's not, again, it's not like offensive or misinformative either.
Done responsibly.
It's done well enough. And my other favorite performance in the thing is Olivia Cooke's Artemis, though. I think that I think the way she's written is good, and the way that she communicates the character's energy is really strong too.
Well, but also it's kind of a good time to point out the weaknesses between, Wade Watts, whose parents are both dead, and so or her like her at least her father's dead.
Her dad. We don't know. We don't learn anything about her mother in either. We don't learn anything about her mother, but her father is dead.
But like her father having died in one of IOI's loyalty centers, which for folks who haven't seen this is basically indentured servitude to pay back your debt, right? So what that does to her is something that everybody can immediately relate to, understand, and there's not even like 20 minutes of context here. It's a pretty quick conversation.
It's a quick conversation. She delivers it emotionally, and immediately you're like, yeah, I'm totally with you. Like, yeah, go get him. Like you totally relate to her, and as to like why she's doing what she's doing, why she's so passionate about it. And again, I think like they couldn't have made her the main character without like heavily restructuring the entire thing, because it is like Wade is like the hero at the center of it. But I think that she does a really great job with her part, and makes a great impression as a character that you want to follow around for reasons you can relate with.
Yeah, and I think maybe clearly she has that effect on Wade while it's true, because his aunt just dies and he does not give a fuck.
Yeah,
no, I am more concerned over Artemis at this point than my actual family.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, like, you killed my mom's sister. I'm like, wow. Okay. Wow.
Like, you can't even say aunt.
Yeah,
your emotional devastation is heart-rending, Wade. And like, that's the thing. Like, it's so like, it's so, it undercuts like our investment in him, because he only cares about winning this game and getting the girl.
Yeah.
And even at the end, when when he's like leading, it's like, no, I don't believe that you care about everyone. Well, I believe that you care about you and your girl that you've like. Yeah,
that we don't have the context of for why you love her so much. Watching her Twitch streams.
No, that's the thing. Like, she like that. Like, that's the thing. Like, in the beginning, he's like, "Oh my god, I've seen all her Twitch streams and I've watched all her YouTube videos and I've watched it because it's like." So you are a fan of her. That doesn't mean love, sir. Like, I'm a fan of several YouTubers. I'm not like in love with them though.
Yeah.
The way they establish it in the movie, I'm like, oh, so he's a fanboy of her. That
Pretty
doesn't
much
mean love.
No. I mean, I want to know what love is myself, but I don't think it's that.
No. Yeah. And again, that's like one of my favorite lines in the movie is like when they go out on a date and she tells him like, you only see what I want you to see. And, I wrote this down. I don't remember what it was. Like, she basically says like, you're in love with the idea of me that I'm presenting to you and everyone else here. You don't know what I actually look like, who I actually am, how, and like his friend H is even like, for all you know, he could be like a 30-year-old guy that's basically named Chuck. That stuff is really smart. It's like
it's a solid level 2 breakup line of you don't love me, you love the idea of me. Thing going on.
And it's a very real problem that people have in online relationships, right? Well, like you don't know, like, especially I've seen people that fell in love over MMOs who fell in love, behind an avatar, right? So it makes sense to me that this thing would still happen in 2045, right? Like you're enamored with someone's veneer, you're enamored with what they show you. But her point is totally dead on that. Yeah, you don't know who I am. You just love what you see. And I think once again, this is a very strong point for why Samantha Cook is really the better main character, at least in the movie depiction. Than Wade Watson.
Samantha. Yeah. yeah, again, I think the movie is at its strongest when it is acknowledging things like that are very real. Like people don't know what they look like behind MMOs. They know them by their hashtags and their usernames, and the movie promotes the idea ultimately that, like, you can't be absorbed into pop culture all the time. Like you need to have
relationships
actual relationships with people. And again, I think, and that is the aspect of the movie that, again, I think it could have been executed better, but the fact that it's even there speaks a lot more loudly now, because a lot of people have had to have major relationships with others, like communicating over Twitter or online. People aren't able to physically see each other now as much, and so I feel like there's probably a lot more relationships that are just completely over the keyboard. And so the fact that this movie is trying to point out, like, that shouldn't be your ideal relationship goal, to just only befriend people online over geek stuff. It's like that's
not enough.
That's a really good point. And I really appreciate the movie for that. I think the movie does a much better job. The movie does a really good job of that. The book doesn't, for various reasons. But yeah, the movie earns the point for that in the way that it goes about it.
And that's what I think is interesting about this movie, is that it's visually stunning. There's for the people that are the pop culture nerds, like us, literally on this call.
I love all that. I love it. So I remember, like, I was in the film, like, oh my god, Beetlejuice is over there.
I see that, like Ninja Turtles at one point. It's like I'm seeing a reference to Borderlands on, like, a really quick pan of the camera, like
the swarm of Master Chiefs storming. I'm like, that's cool.
Yep, you get what Tracer from Overwatch was storming the castle at the last sec. Was kind of fun. Ryu from Street Fighter right away was there too. Like, all this stuff was great.
And not to mention the Orb of Ossovox.
I actually don't know what that was referencing. Like, I got that it was supposed to be a reference to something, but I don't know what that was referring to.
So the Orb of Ossovox, some people have theorized that the name might reference, like, Ohio State University, OSU, is in part of it, right? Others have pointed to the fact that the chant that they do is from the movie Excalibur, and so
it is.
Okay,
all right. Yeah, I haven't seen Excalibur yet, so that, again, I understood, like, this is probably a reference to something. I just don't know it.
Yeah, well, it's really cool because it's multi-layered, right? And I think that's what is really nice about pop culture references, is that if you see the surface level of something, like you do like what we talked about with the relationship between Wade and Samantha, the surface isn't the full story, right? If you just saw Ossovox and you're like, that looks weird, I don't know what that is. But then you look into the chant for how to activate it, you realize it's a quote from Excalibur, and it's actually Gaelic as well. Like, it's, so I think that's, like, a really good way to look at this, is that, what you see isn't all that's there. There's a lot more beneath the surface. Iceberg analogy.
That's some ogre level layering going on there.
This is this giant onion of an analysis. I appreciate that those are there. That at least, like, even if I didn't understand them or know what they were, they at least make sense in the movie. It's like, okay, we need the Orb of Ossovox. Okay, it's some powerful thing that the bad guys want, and this chant thing is what they use to activate it. Like, you can connect what these things do to each other, even if you don't know what exactly it is, like what exactly they're referring to.
Yep.
Which is good.
And then you get items like the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. So everyone recognizes them.
Which was that was a wasted opportunity, because there was nothing about what you have to count to before you
there's no
that.
counting involved in that at all. You don't go all the way to 5. That's too much.
1, 2, 5, 3, sir. 3.
the references are pretty well handled. They're laden in it if you recognize them, and if you don't recognize them, you're not gonna. I don't think you'll be as invested, but you can at least follow what's happening most of the time.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kevin, because that's kind of where I was going to steer towards, is that even though this movie has so many things that you could just jot down, I mean, there's well over like 130 references within this movie.
I don't even want to count that.
Yeah. I don't. I'd be afraid to. It's like I need about 10 years.
Well, in my hubris, I was thinking, all right, why don't I just go through and read every reference in this movie? But then I thought, we don't have that much time.
No, we don't have that time.
But here's the point, I think, is at least this is my take on the movie, because there's a lot of different people out there who have rated it a certain way, and we will too at the end of this conversation. But I think what was really a strength of this movie, outside of the fact that we don't get strong character development, is that like Kevin, like you mentioned, there are very important points that they make about, the importance of spending time outside of these things, actually dealing with the real problems in your life. And then at the core of this film, plot issues aside, we've got very, very strong acting from top to bottom.
Yeah, from everyone.
Yeah, gorgeous cinematography, once again, on the strength of Janusz Kaminski. And I would say it's actually an achievement in a lot of ways visually, because of how much they could fit into the screen at any given time, which is a testament to what Steven Spielberg mentioned, that I think he said this is the third toughest movie I've ever had to make.
Oh no, and it looks like it, because there's so much stuff happening in most of the shots in this. Like there are very few moments where the movie really calms down a bit, and those moments are great. Like those moments are great, and are some of my favorites in the movie. But yeah, for like 90% of it, there's always something in the background, or some special effect, or something moving around, and it's like, I can't imagine how he went around directing this, and how Zach Penn worked with Ernest Cline to condense this thing down to something that was like followable to people and mostly made sense. I mean, like, world building and characterization aside, like, if anything, it's fun. Like all the another thing, like all this detail thing, like the themes and all, this is all done in a very like fun blockbustery package way. Like there's action, there's a ton of action in this. It's like very popcorn centric. I mean, it's a blockbuster movie, but if you look, like, if you pay attention to it, there are moments in it where it is trying to get at things that it didn't have to.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of on the topic of, once again, trying to fit in as many references that made sense. I actually can't believe it took us that long to mention Cline. I don't think he's
we didn't. Ernest Cline, the writer of this book and Ready Player 2 and other things that shall not be mentioned. But like, but yeah, he I don't know how much of the script he wrote and how much of the script the other guy wrote.
Oh, Zach Penn.
Zach Penn, and he's written a bunch of like blockbusters, like, but
he wrote the Avengers, the screenplay for the Avengers,
the Avengers and the Incredible Hulk and a bunch of other stuff. I feel like the stuff in the movie that works best are the changes that they make to it, so that it's a more like it's a better movie. It's like they change up, they make Wade a lot more likable. They make kind of changes to the key stuff into the story and what they are and what they do. Again, I read those and I was like, thank God they changed them.
The book makes some very deep Dungeons and Dragons references.
Oh no! Again, I just skipped past it. I was like, what is he doing? Like, I've never played these. What? And I thought, like, wait, that's what he's doing? You're kidding me! All this detail for this?
Yeah.
And so again, the movie, the strongest points are the changes that it makes to make it a more satisfying and digestible movie. I think the few weak spots are like when it has to condense world building down, and the romance between the two of them I don't think works really. Like, the romance doesn't work because the source material they're pulling from was problematic, and so they don't have a ton that they can draw from to flesh it out unless they made up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, the romance almost becomes like an 80s movie,
it is an 80s movie because like she's like, no, I don't
literally,
love you.
Right?
But then the end of it, the last it's like, what? You see the entire movie being this like very like, the third act of this turns into an 80s movie. It's like, we gotta rescue the girl, guys. I'm like, really? We're doing that?
Well, I mean, so many other like tropes and references came from the 80s for that movie anyway. Why not stick that in there?
I mean,
I'm not like excusing it, but no.
It just was like, and I think that the IOI loyalty center scene is really, I think that's where the movie takes a needed kind of dark turning point, because the first half of this, I was thinking, like, when I saw the first time, I'm like, okay, so is this just a really, really like violent 80s kids movie? And then it gets to the IOI loyalty center, I'm like, oh no, okay, no, they're not. Because again, I thought for a long time, like, okay, this is a kids movie. How much are kids gonna know or care? And then it gets to that, and you're like, never mind. Actually,
never mind. Okay.
And again, I like that. I like that they went there and showed that. I don't think that they. There's a section in the book where they kind of do it, but I feel like seeing it visually is a little bit more impactful because the way the way the world is designed and the way that the sequence is shot and Olivia Cook's acting, and like that scene is really powerful and sticks out.
Yeah, I do want to say that despite some of the areas of the plot that they really just truncate and crank up, right? They do leave us with, once again, some very important themes, whether it is the regret of Halliday or the lessons behind starting to cut corporate ties and getting away from that. And then Wade learning the lessons of these people through their memories and through the things that they made public, right? I mean, that's what kind of makes up for some of these other shortfalls in the movie. And one point I'll make before we get to our personal reviews, when we give it the scores here. I think the most compelling aspect of this movie is something that really tugged at my heartstrings from the Assassin's Creed trilogy that involved Ezio Auditore, one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Well,
I'm actually playing Assassin's Creed 2 right now. I've got
nice.
Nice. I'm playing that one. He's more interesting to follow around than Altair. But I like Altair. I like Altair from. I was like, this guy's a lot more charismatic and funny, and he has a more distinctive personality to him. I'm more invested in following him than I am in Altair. You are to go here and kill this man. Kill this man. Now you have your knives back. Kill this man.
I don't want to ruin too much for you if you're going to play it, but this line is really poignant, and I'll mention it. Ezio mentions that he's blessed to be able to tell stories across centuries. Okay. And I think that is one of the most important aspects of this, is that Halliday gets to tell his story to people years after his death. And there's something about the ability to share stories across history that's really spellbinding, right? Or it's really, it's crazy, because there's a part of you that wants Halliday to still exist somehow. You love his character so much, you get so attached to him that you hope in some way or some form at the end of all this, is this guy still alive? I want him to be alive.
Mhm.
Like his story's that compelling.
Mhm.
So, but tell you what, as a way to wrap this up, and Kevin, we
Mhm.
will let you have the first crack since you're our guest. What's your rating for this movie?
So my rating for this is the same that it was when I first saw it three years ago, which is like while I think the visuals are great, and the visuals and the action sequences are spellbinding, and the acting is great, and the ideas that they touch upon give it weight that I don't think it had as much like when it first came out, but as time's gone on, these things have become a little bit more in the public eye, and so I don't know, it connects more emotionally on those ideas. The lack of character development and world building do hold it they really do kind of hold it back though, because again, if the scenes weren't there and the animation wasn't great, it would be a problem. And I'm interested to see how the animation looks in 5 years or something, because I feel like if the animation ever looks bad, it's going to be a really big problem for the movie. But for now, I give it a 3 out of 5, which is average. Only again because the world building and the character stuff isn't as good as it could be, and some of the messages are really well handled, and others I feel like they could have written better in the way that they were talked about. I would recommend it absolutely if you are a fan of this pop culture or just movies or games or stuff like that. If you're not, I don't think you'll get as much out of this, but the action will still entertain you.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, Joe. What about you? What are your thoughts on a on a 5 scale here? What do you think?
5 scale here, because we'll go with obscure references. I'm gonna give this 3.5 troll dolls out of 5 troll dolls on this one. And further to the same reason we talked about is because even though world building is kind of weak, character development's definitely weak in this. At no point do I not care about any of the characters. I still want Way to succeed. I still want to see why am I forgetting her name?
Artemis.
Artemis,
Samantha.
Yeah. I want Samantha to be avenged in this movie and for her to get justice that she's seeking. I want all of our characters that we're supposed to like. I do like all of them, so it does well with that. And the fanfare in this is the Gundam alone made me love this movie, and the fact that it wasn't just a passing scene, or just a passing reference, that it had an actual key part of this.
Yeah,
it was huge. And the only live action looking thing I've had before that for Gundam was G Savior, and it's something that's so bad even Bandai likes to pretend that it hasn't happened. So yeah, so that's why I'm going 3.5. So for me, I'm going just slightly above average. It's a favorable fun movie. Not gonna go quite to the 4 or 5 area, but yeah, 3.5 troll dolls out of 5 troll dolls is where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
For me, that's so, not to copy you, Joe. That's basically where I went to with this. So 3.5 out of 5 is where I'm at because of some of the things we've mentioned. Visually stunning movie. The music is all. I can't believe we forgot to mention the music. Alan Silvestri is behind the music. Also collaborated with Spielberg. He did the music for Back to the Future, so a lot of his undertones are on display here. But for some of the areas outside of character development, I think they did do a good job with the lesson of unplugging, which I'm guilty of. I need to do more of that.
Yeah.
And living more in the real world, which is a point they don't exactly make until it's the last 30 seconds of the movie.
It's too late. When they made that, I was like, that would have been such a great point if you had set it up more earlier. Oh my god, this here.
Well, and make the point early so that you can reinforce the decision making of everybody in the movie to kind of relate to it, you know?
Yeah, the decision that they make when he's narrating the last bit, the decision, and I'm like, why did you make that decision? I have no idea why you made that decision.
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense. Like, it didn't make sense in either version of this. It's like, what? Why?
Yeah, we never talk about a desire to shut down the OASIS, you know, a few times a week. But
even Artemis didn't do that. You know, if somebody would have done it, it would have been like, I would have bought it if she had said, "Okay, let's do it." But because it's him, I was like, I do not buy that you would want to do that.
Yeah, I just spent 2 hours watching you dick around and enjoying yourself in the OASIS.
I spent 2 hours like watching you run around cutscenes. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do you want to get out of it? Like, I mean, yeah, like they show that you can do things in the OASIS where it's like, okay, you can do this here. Again, why do you want to leave? Why do you, as a character, want to leave it? What have you? How have you changed to come to that mindset?
Yeah, you legitimately have to traverse your living arrangement with a well-placed rope, and you have to go past a woman who's dancing on a pole.
I love it. Like, I love it. I love it. I love that. It's like the opening shot where he's like doing like mini parkour off of trailer park posts to get down to his van, and I'm like, or to his game. I'm like, how have you not broken your leg by misjudging a jump at some point?
Yeah,
like, this entire structure is gonna like fall over with you on it at some point. Like, so yeah.
Well, I mean, I think clearly what we have here is just what we'd call the bleeding effect from all of his time spent in.
Oh, very true.
Animus.
Yeah,
that way. It's all just muscle memory. He can do everything that he does in the OASIS.
Yeah, he can. It's all...
Well, Kevin, we appreciate you for one reaching out to us about this, and two joining us today to break down this film. I think, you know, some very great points were made today about why this movie is a great popcorn movie, and it's very entertaining, but there are some things they could fix, and we're very careful on this show not to just tear down something to tear it down, right? And so
I don't. Yeah, I don't. There are very, very rare cases where I will like tear something down to do it. Like, I don't go into movies wanting to dislike them. Like, I go into everything like trying to meet it on whatever level it's trying to be at. And, you know, I always try to be, you know, again, I'm not going to, like, if the movie's not trying to be an epic thing, I'm not going to critique for not. Like, look, if you want to be a fun popcorn movie, then fine. If you can do that successfully, then I will enjoy it. If you want to get at some deeper ideas but half-ass them, then yeah, that's a problem, because you shouldn't bring things up unless you want to commit fully to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But and you know that strengths and weaknesses. This movie's got a little bit of both. But hey, less movie related. Kevin, in a completely un-Wade Watts way, where could our listeners find you on the internet if they want to hear more from you?
All right. If you want to read more of my thoughts, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram are Kevin the Critic. Twitter hashtag is @Kevin_the Critic, and you can read my full-length film reviews at kevinthecritic.com.
All right, awesome. Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for coming today. Really fun chatting with you about a pretty fun movie, great popcorn flick, and good times, great oldies,
great times.
Digital Dissection,
great times.
Man, I am glad that corporate Scrooge got what he had coming, and I think what makes me the most mad about him is that he got to pilot Mechagodzilla before I did. Son of a bitch.
You know, I have almost forgot for a moment that you have an adoration for robots, especially large-scale ones that no one else has that I've met in my life.
They're just so cool.
You know what? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know what? I am really glad that we had, a new friend of the podcast pop on this week So, just a big thank you to Kevin the Critic for joining us and having a pretty solid conversation about that movie and, a little bit about the book at the same time.
Yeah. And on top of that, too, Kevin's been doing movie reviews ever since 2005. So, folks, definitely go out and check out some of the work he's done.
Mm-hmm.
You can find him at Kevin the Critic on Twitter. And he's also got his own webpage where he documents all of that info. So in lieu of doing what we normally do at the end of our podcast this week, rather than give you a preview, because you'll see that information inevitably.
Oh, yeah, it'll be there. We will post a lot about it much later or very soon, depending on when you listen to this. We may have already posted it in the past because you catch up to the podcast, which is fine. That's the brilliancy and the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah, it's like time fluidity, right? Like no matter what point you exist, like it's like this show has already given you the information you need for next week.
Yep. No matter how far you get through our story, Achilles will not come back.
Yeah, God damn it. Well, I'll tell you what, this week we want to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a couple shout outs to some of our friends out there in the Twitterverse.
That's the sound it makes.
Yeah. Well, you might notice a couple weeks ago we were joined by our friends here at Switch the Envelope. So Jeff and Corey joined us for a very in-depth discussion on the evolution of nerd and the wave that it kind of took over pop culture with. So quick shout out for them. They actually had a really cool guest on their show, Jack Seaver McDonald, who is the star of Never Have I Ever on Netflix. So we wanted to say, great job to Jeff and Corey for that episode, and definitely go check it out if you haven't yet. It's a really cool interview. Joe, what have you got?
Well, I would like to give a shout out to actually, I believe, the first two people that we have ever had as like guests on our podcast. We did a crossover episode, and that's Chris and Leslie over at Measuring the Score podcast. They, I believe, just did a review of the score to Independence Day. The classic one that we all really liked, not the newer one that was kind of questionable. But at least in that one, Brent Spiner's hair looked like it should have. Like it wasn't like an oddly placed on wig. Poor Data. Didn't deserve weird hair that he got in Picard. So if you haven't stopped in and listened to their musical expertise on the music of the movies that we love, go check them out again. They are fantastic, entertaining, and very, very well educated. And I would dare to wager know more what they're talking about than we do.
Yeah. Well, and another quick kudos to Chris. He actually just created the original motion picture soundtrack for Legends, a Friday the 13th tale. So that music is out there. You can listen to that now. So definitely hats off to Chris. It's a great achievement, and we're absolutely over the moon for you here.
Heck
getting
yeah,
that work
man.
out. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Other than that, we did get a nice, comfy, cheap seat review happening a few weeks ago, where I believe it should be airing soon with our buddy Sean, where we talk about Master and Commander. Across the world, is that what it is? What's the rest of that title? Like, it keeps going. It's more than it should. Like, they could have just stopped at Master and Commander and would have been fine. But it was Master and Commander.
It's like the far eastern, the what is it? The far side of the world, or something like that.
That sounds right. The far side of the world. Let's go with that. It's the if you know, it's the endearing story of Russell Crowe and his tugboat tugger going around the world fighting people. Or it's about a British ship tasked to take out a Yank-made French ship, the Acheron, going around sinking things. So if you haven't stopped by Cheap Seat Reviews for a great conversation on some of our favorite movies, which, by the way, totally jealous they did Real Steel without me. But at the same time, great movie. Great movie, Master and Commander. So if you haven't gone to Cheap Seat Reviews recently, don't forget about our buddy Sean. Go check him out.
Yeah, and actually, this was a fairly harrowing review that we did because we didn't know if Joe was actually going to survive that interview. So we'll let you guys listen in and find out if Joe survives, even though he's here right now talking to us. Unless it did.
Could be a time variant. We don't know. because I am wearing glasses now, and that's a new development.
Well, folks, we're not going to once again give you a preview of what next week is, but definitely stay tuned because we actually have some pretty big announcements coming up with some very fun guests. And so rather than blow our wad here, sorry to create that visual.
No, that was
but yes, we got some very big announcements on the way. So stay tuned. Take a look at our social media, and until next time, keep on dissecting.
Anything you want to add, Chelsea?
Chelsea?
We miss Chelsea. We
Those
really
damn weddings.
Really miss Chelsea.
Don't worry, she'll come back. We hope.